we were kids, war has been an ever-present nature in our lives, mostly because of the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But when we think of war, however, I think our generation gets it wrong because we are missing the main point that is affecting us the most. When we think of war, we either think that it's filled with honor and glory, or that it's filled with death and destruction. But Brian Turner's poem, Eulogy, provides us with a first-hand account of one of the most troubling effects of war, which is the psychological effects that people can take from it. So here's Eulogy. It happens on a Monday at 11:20 a.m. as tower guards eat sandwiches and seagulls drift by on the Tigris River. Prisoners tilt their heads to the west through burlap sacks that duct tape them. The sound reverberates down concertina coils the way a piano wire thrums when given slack, and it happens like this. On a blue day of sun, when Private Miller pulls the trigger to take brass and fire into his mouth, the sound lifts up the birds off the water, a mongoose pauses under the orange trees, and nothing can stop it now. No matter what blur of motion surrounds him, no matter what voices crackle over the radio in static confusion, because if only for this moment the earth is still, and Private Miller is found what low hush there is down by the eucalyptus shade there by the river. So I'm going to hit on 3 main points. The first point is how Brian Turner writes the poem and what it says about suicide. The second is the effects that suicide can have on others. And the third point is that it is a military issue that we need to deal with sooner rather than later. So the poem starts out slow and as if nothing's going to happen. Soldiers are going about their day in a mundane manner, eating sandwiches, watching prisoners. And I think this goes to show that the warning signs to suicide can be subtle and people just don't expect it to happen. And then without warning, Turner writes the line where Private First Class Miller kills himself. And this shows the sudden nature of the war, that it can catch people off guard and they have no idea what to do. The thing that really gets me though is Miller never intended for anyone to hear it, because once he pulled the trigger, he was already gone. This brings me to my second point. Suicide affects a lot of people other than the people that just committed. Miller didn't expect anyone to hear the gunshot because he was already gone, but he couldn't have been more wrong. He left behind friends and family and fellow soldiers to deal with the situation that he had caused. This situation affected Turner so greatly to the point that even years after the suicide had occurred, it was still a main point of one of his poems. The CDC put out a study that showed that surviving family members and close friends are deeply impacted by each suicide and experience a range of complex emotions such as grief, anger, abandonment, and denial. The CDC goes on to say that it can even leave them so distraught that they are at a higher risk of committing suicide themselves. This brings me to my third point. Currently, the U.S. is seeing the end to 2 of its longest fought wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And Turner, being an Army veteran, has seen firsthand what effects these wars can cause on people. Since these wars have started to ramp up and even in their ramp down, there has been a huge rise in suicide in the military, and it has effectively changed the face of the military. USA Today wrote about a study that showed that now the leading cause of death in the military is suicide. It has surpassed deaths in battle, which is outrageous, because when you think of the military, you think of people out there fighting in war and dying. You don't think of them having to go home and deal with the psychological effects of what they went through. The Citizens Commission on Human Rights also put out a stat that said that the military averages at least 1 death from suicide per day. And the American Journal of Psychiatry put out a stat that said that just from being in the military, the majority of us are at-risk people because we're young and male. Brian Turner's poem, Eulogy, accomplishes many important goals, and it shows how sudden suicide can be. It shows that suicides can affect more than just the person who commits it, and most importantly, it highlights that it's an issue that the military needs to deal with. This issue kind of hits home for me as well personally, because my sister works at the VA as a suicide counselor on the hotline. So I've had to hear a lot of stories of how just hearing about people that are about to commit suicide when she's trying to talk them down has affected her and has affected her coworkers. So, thank you.
You got 5 on the nose, you got 5 of 1. Nice. Did you just wait a second or push the button again? Because he was so disappointed.
He was, I think it's all 14.
You know what?